What's up, everyone? It's your good friend Eric Thompson. This is the Leading Edge Podcast. It's episode number 54. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. I so appreciate it. So grateful for all of you who engage with this podcast. It means the world to me. This one is going to be really fun. I'm going to talk about this book, this amazing book, this timely book called Pendulum. Speaking of books, my new book, The No Drama Zone, oh my goodness, it drops today on the very day that I'm recording this podcast. This is my launch day for the book, The No Drama Zone. I hope that you grab that book. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it in print. You can find it on Amazon. It's good. I know I'm biased. I think there's some good stuff in there. I think it's timely. I think this book, The No Drama Zone, is timely given what we're seeing and feeling in the world right now. I think a lot of people feel like there's a whole heck of a lot of drama. They need some strategies to help with that. Speaking of timely books, I'm going to give you this book report today on an amazing book called Pendulum. It's written by Roy Williams and Michael Drew. These two gentlemen co-authored the book. The subtitle is this: How Past Generations Shape Our Present and Predict Our Future. Whoa, that sounds like some pretty heavy stuff. It is heavy, and yet it's really simple, straightforward, the things they talk about in this book. Okay, guys, here's the deal. I need to give a little preface, a little maybe a disclaimer to everything I'm about to talk about. I need to frame this up, and I'm going to say a few things. Number one, this book really helped me to understand and explain what's happening in the world. All right. So right now in the world, I think a lot of people would say that it seems like there's a whole heck of a lot of divisiveness and bitterness, strife, frustration, anger, lots of people who just aren't happy. I think one example is the election. So I'm making this just a few days before the election, so you might be listening to this after the election regardless. What's interesting, I think, is that so many people are not voting for someone, they're really voting against someone. So I think that if I were to ask you who you voted for, and then if I asked you why, I think you really would get into more about the other candidate and why you don't like them. That's what I hear more than anything. It's really about voting against someone, not really voting for someone. So that's an example. Now, even though this book helped me explain it and help me understand it, it does not justify it. All right. So I'm not saying that certain behavior that we may see in the world that we don't think is okay is now justified based on what I'm going to tell you from this book. No, not at all. This book is about patterns that occur in Western civilization, and it's very interesting. So this is a research book, all right? This book does not take a position. It's just a research book, and I'm not taking a position either. I'm just telling you the research, which I think is fascinating. And that also means that we're not like passively okay with anything. So even though we're going to understand these patterns, we're going to say, oh my gosh, that's fascinating, that's so interesting. That doesn't mean that we're now just going to be passive about it and just say, oh, well, that's just the way things are, and we're just going to sit back and just let the world do these things. Like, no, we can still play a very active role and stand up for what we believe in and do what's right and contribute, right? We're not just going to be passively sitting back and even, or hiding, that'd be the worst thing. Well, I'm just going to hide until things change in the world. Then I'll come out from my metaphorical cave, and then I'll go contribute. But I'm going to wait for the world to become less stormy, more nice. Then I'll go out and do my thing. But until then, I'm just going to hide. I'm going to wait. No, we're not going to do that. So please don't take this, what I'm about to say, don't take it that way either. Okay, another thing that's interesting is that if we look at the world right now, a lot of us may immediately jump to what we see happening in the United States. Well, you know what? There's things similar to what's happening in the United States all over the world, especially in Western society. Brexit is an example that happened a few years ago. There's just a lot of angst in Europe right now. We see a whole lot of groups forming. It's this group versus that group, this position versus that position. It's happening all over, not just in the United States, all right? Again, not justifying it, it's just really fascinating. It's really interesting. We're not passive about it, but we take active role. We still contribute no matter what. It's just really, really interesting. This book is based on several thousand years. And so what the authors did is they went back several thousand years and they found a distinct pattern in society. All right. And we're focused on Western society. And so they found this distinct pattern that is clearly and distinctly an 80-year pattern. So, guys, we've all heard that expression. We know this thing called history repeats itself. History does repeat itself. And the metaphor, a couple of metaphors to use. One is it's just like the tide. You know that the tide goes out, and then the tide comes back in, right? So the moon pulls the ocean one way, and then the moon pulls the ocean back the other way. The tide goes out, the tide goes in. You can predict it. You know, if you live near the ocean, you know about tide charts and tide tables where you could look at the tide chart and know the exact time of high tide and the exact time of low tide. Like, it's very predictable. So this is the same kind of thing. This is the tide going out, the tide going in. It's an 80-year pattern. The other metaphor is the name of the book, pendulum, right? So think of a pendulum swinging back and forth, right? So it swings, it goes all the way up to what the authors would call a zenith, where the pendulum stops ever so momentarily and then starts the swing back the other way all the way to the other side, to the other zenith, again, where it momentarily stops and then it swings back. So the same thing's happening, all right? So as we talk through these patterns, as we talk through what's happening, just imagine that pendulum swinging back and forth in society. The pendulum simply swings. Now, what's helped me also as I look at what's happening in the world is it gives me some comfort to know that what's happening right now is the pendulum is swinging. All right, it's swinging and it will swing back the other way. But again, that doesn't mean that I'm just going to wait around for the pendulum to be swinging back the other way for the world to feel nicer. No, we got to keep after it. We got to keep contributing. We have to keep helping. Dare I say, even more so, we need to keep helping. But it does give me comfort to know that the pendulum is swinging, and I can give some reason and logic to what I'm seeing in the world right now that may seem on the surface super illogical, highly emotional, and it is. It's very, very emotionally charged, but there's actually some reasons to it. There's some science to it. Things like that help me. Hopefully this is going to help you. So like I said, it's an 80-year pattern, distinct 80-year pattern. In using the metaphor of a pendulum, think of the pendulum at the apex all the way on one side. It takes 40 years for it to swing all the way to the other side. So from one side all the way to the other side is 40 years. And then how long does it take to swing all the way back to the other side? Well, it takes another 40 years. So over the course of 80 years, that pendulum will have swung from one side all the way to the other, and then all the way back to the original side. So another way to say that is that society is entirely different every 40 years. Society is entirely different every 40 years in terms of how it feels, in terms of what society generally values, in terms of what we notice in society, in terms of what is important in society, the things that get highlighted, the things that are popular. There are lots of examples in the book about music, for example, really interesting examples about music that becomes popular at one apex versus another kind of apex, and people who are popular, not just music, but the people who become popular during these apexes. By the way, I should have said this up front. Please buy the book. Don't just listen to this podcast. Please go out and buy the book. It's fascinating, and I think it's really going to help you. All right. So the names of these zeniths. So again, we use the term zenith to describe the apex. You know, where that pendulum momentarily stops and it starts swinging the other way. So the extreme, we call those zeniths me, me, and we, we. Me and a we are the names of the two extremes. So as you're thinking about this pendulum in your mind, one side, one extreme, all the way to one side is called a me, the other side is called a we. Here's the thing. We are nearing a zenith of the we. And so if you feel like things are feeling extreme in the world, that's why, because we are coming up based on this pattern. We are like 3 years away. That may bum you out to think, oh my gosh, you mean we got 3 more years to go? Yes. It's really two, because the 2023 would be the zenith according to this book. So we're about to hit 2021. We're nearing the zenith of a we. Now you may be thinking, wait a minute, we? Things don't feel like we. Like, you may start to think about we as like kumbaya kind of we, like there we all are, just linked arm in arm, and we're all in this together, and come on guys, let's go, and we're one big happy family, and we're linked arm in arm around the world, and it's a small world after all, right? And you can just imagine all races, creeds, religions, nationalities. We're gonna join arm in arm, and you can imagine that, like, this image of people are like around the world, literally like around the equator, if they could somehow stand on water, right? We're all just linked arm in arm, and that's we. No, that's not at all what we means. Not at all. It's not kumbaya. We is us and them. And don't you notice a fair amount of us and them in the world right now? So we means there is us, there's this group of people, and there is them, there's that group of people. And these two groups are very different. And what we stand for is way different than what they stand for. And I'm going to stick with this group because we're right. That other group is wrong. And it's us and it's them. Right? And don't you feel that in the world right now? So here's the thing about a zenith of we. And I'm going to say some words that are not comfortable to say. And it's kind of it may agitate for you what you're already feeling. It may kind of invigorate those things that you're already feeling, but it's real. Here's what's going on. So a we, it's about a few things. It's about blame. It's about being self-righteous, which means it's about being right? So again, the whatever group you're choosing to associate with, you definitely feel that you are with the right group and the other group of people are wrong. A zenith of a we is about witch hunts. Ugh. And we'll talk about distinct things that happened in the zenith of a we, and witch hunts is one of the things that happens. Like literally witch hunts is something that happens during a we. The extreme of a we is also about personal liberties being stripped away. I think a lot of people would say that, my gosh, I feel like right now a lot of my liberties are being stripped away. So that's one extreme, all right? So in the extreme of a we, that's what's going on. As uncomfortable as that may sound, that's just the deal. That's what happens during zenith of a we. Now, way over on the other side, on the me is all about personal expression. Me is very much about status and bling, right? It's also about looking through the world with these rose-colored glasses. Everything is possible. Everything's great. And I think what really hit home for me, what really made the example and made me really understand the extreme of a me, is to look at the pop stars that were popular 40 years ago. So 40 years ago, and the authors of Pendulum make this point, 40 years ago, the pop stars who were popular were Madonna, Michael Jackson. And sure, they maintained some popularity even after, even past 1983. But think about like the early mid 80s and the music and pop culture then. Wasn't it all about personal expression and status? And think about Madonna's popular song. We are living in a material world and I'm a material girl. Like, does that sum up a me better than anything? Can you imagine that theme really catching on right now? Like, that just doesn't really resonate right now. You may like that song, which is great, and you can listen to that song now, but like that theme wouldn't really be catching on today. All right, so that's kind of what's happening at the zenith of a we and a me. Now, here's where it gets really fascinating. When you start to march backwards in time in 80-year chunks of time, this gets really, really interesting. Okay, so because again, it takes how long for the pendulum to swing from one side to another? 40 years. How long does it take to go all the way back to where it started in another 40 years? So the point is, if we are right now nearing an apex of a we, that means that 80 years ago, the similar thing was happening. We were nearing an apex of a we, all right? And then take it back another 80 years and then another 80 years. So if you could march back like that, give or take a few years, let's think about what was happening. So what was happening 80 years ago? World War II was happening 80 years ago. What led up to that? Hitler and what he was doing in Europe, right? And think about the Holocaust. Think about also what was happening in Russia. Stalin in charge, something called the Great Purge was occurring. In the United States, what was going on at that time, a little bit after World War II, was Joseph McCarthy and the Un-American Activities Committee. Does that seem like that's something that could be happening now? And again, I'm not taking positions on here. Both, if you're thinking political parties, well, you know what? Both parties are responsible for things like this. There's a whole lot of us and them. Like I see the parties, it's staking their claim in the us and blaming others and being self-righteous, right? That's what's happening in both parties. So don't be thinking, well, yeah, my party's right. Yeah, look at them being all bad about that. Like there you go, like contributing to the us and them. All right, so that was 40 years ago. How about 80 years ago? Oh, I'm sorry, that was 80 years ago. World War II. Go back 80 years from that was the Civil War. You talk about an us and them, and I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh my gosh, do you think we're headed to another civil war?" I think we could argue that we already are in a civil war, right? So 80 years before World War II was the Civil War. 80 years before that was the Revolutionary War. Another us and them, another self-righteous, personal liberties being stripped away. That's why there was the revolution in the first place, right? Where the founding fathers led the charge to say, hey, our personal liberties are being stripped away by the government and the rulers in England. We need a revolution. So there was the Revolutionary War 80 years before the Civil War. 80 years before that was the Salem witch trials. It was also something called the Glorious Revolution in England. 80 years before that was something called the English Petition of Right. And that's where they determined that the king could no longer tax the people of the kingdom without the permission of the parliament. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like the Revolutionary War? 80 years before that was Copernicus saying that we are not the center of the universe. And isn't that interesting? Because it's really the apex of a me, where someone would feel like they're the center of the universe, but that definitely does not occur during the apex of a we. So it's just kind of interesting that came out right during an apex of a we. We found out that we're not the center of the universe. The Earth is not the center of the universe, and nor of the solar system, right? So I think you get the point. So these patterns repeat themselves. Every 80 years, you can find distinctly the same kinds of things, the same kinds of values, the same kinds of feelings going on in the world every 80 years. So there are some good things about a we. A we starts off great. A we starts off with this dream of connectedness and working together for common good. I think some good examples are recycling. Look how popular recycling has been in the last little bit. So recycling is all about, hey, let's work together to save our planet. Let's be respectful of our planet and look at how we're using materials. Let's look for ways to reuse these materials. Recycling is a great example of a we kind of thing. And hey, by the way, I'm all for recycling. I'm not saying that the only reason we should recycle is because of a we. I think that's great. I think think about also secondhand smoke and how, smoking and what it does to the people around the smoker. Gosh, you shouldn't smoke because you're having a huge impact on the people around you. That's an example of a we. How about hybrid cars? Let's build hybrid cars to save the planet, right? So we can find other ways to use up our energy, right? So those are all examples of we things that are all good things. I think we could all argue those are good things. But the thing is, it goes too far. We goes too far because the pendulum keeps swinging, right? So again, it starts out with this dream of connectedness and working together, and come on, guys, let's go do this together. And then the next thing you know, there are restrictions, right? So these restrictions come into place, and it makes people feel self-righteous. And the next thing you know, you have this us and them, right? You have the recyclers and the non-recyclers. You have the hybrid car drivers and the non-hybrid car drivers. Like, it is amazing to me to watch so many us's and them's be formed, like, just instantly. It's just so natural for people right now, for society to slip right into the us and them, the mask wearers, the non-mask wearers, one side of the political aisle, the other side of the political aisle. How about what happened in college football? And I'm a huge college football fan. How about when the conferences all made very different decisions initially about what they were going to do? And did you note, if you're a college football fan like me, did you notice how each side was feeling self-righteous about their decision and feeling very proud about their decision? So the conferences that did decide to play, like, that's the right thing to do. We got to give these kids a chance to play, and we got to give them their full experience of college. And darn it, we got to. It's the right thing to do. We got to keep these colleges going along, and we got to play football. And meanwhile, on the other side, it was saying, darn it, we got to save these kids' life. We're gonna kill people if they're out there playing football. And I'm not arguing what side was right or not. But you just watched each side become super self-righteous and become very entrenched in their position. Again, us and them. So then what happens eventually? You're like, oh my God, when's this going to end, right? When is this we thing going to end? So what happens eventually? And there's little things cropping up that even I notice, and you may start to see it. But what happens is people, when this thing is reaching an apex, people just kind of get over it, and they start to long for freedom, right? So they start to long for freedom, for individual expression. Things like personal achievement become super important. And I'm not saying that personal achievement is not important now. That's not what I'm saying. But things like that become even more valued by society in our culture. And so what I can tell you is that 20 years from now, it's gonna, like, you hit this place where just things like across the world just feel amazing, feel wonderful. And then, you know what, 20 more after that, it's going to be right back to way too much, right? Way too much about status and rose-colored glasses. And we'll have another Madonna. Nothing against Madonna. I think she's awesome, but there'll be some other version of, we are living in a material world and I am a material girl. There'll be some other version of that. And the pendulum is just going to swing. Again, that doesn't mean that we should sit around and wait for the world to become nicer and less stormy for us to go out and do our thing and contribute. That doesn't mean that we should just roll over to it and just succumb to it. That doesn't mean that now we're justifying behavior. It's just the pattern, right? So now we're just understanding the pattern. So what I would tell you to finish this up is, I guess, a couple of things. Number one, so you've just heard a bunch of interesting research, and the main thing I want to tell you is the second thing: don't wait, right? Don't wait for certain things to happen externally in the world to be happy, to be fulfilled, to be satisfied, to live. Don't wait, right? So when you heard me say in 20 years things are going to feel awesome, if you're said to yourself, oh my gosh, you mean that I have to wait 20 years for things to be awesome again? No, things can be awesome right now. And don't you see people feeling awesome and doing awesome things right now, even in a stormy world? Yes. So don't wait, right? Don't tie your happiness to wherever the pendulum is in its swing. All right. We're not going to wait 20 years to be happy. Please don't. Please don't wait 20 years to be fulfilled. Please don't wait 20 years to go do something cool. Please don't wait 20 years to go take care of your clients, to do great things in your community, to really engage with your family, right? Like you get it. We're not going to wait around. The world doesn't need us waiting around. The world needs us doing what's right, especially now, right? So people are hurting right now. People are hurting because the world is seemingly stormy, and a little upset right now. So it's causing individuals to be upset. You know what? So you know what? We got to step up. So if you're listening to this podcast, if you're a fan of this podcast, you know all about that. You know about contribution, and it's time to go do that. So go do that, please. The world needs you to do that. Don't wait around to be happy. Don't wait around to be fulfilled. Don't wait around to get after it. We're not waiting for external conditions to be exactly right, because we're going to be waiting around for a long time. And we just go make it happen. So I hope you buy the book. It's super fascinating. I'd be curious to know your comments, questions about this. I'd be curious to know how you react to the book called Pendulum. I think, again, it's timely. I hope that you go grab my book, The No Drama Zone. I think it's pretty darn good. I know I'm biased, but I think it's good. You can find it on Amazon. I appreciate you engaging with this podcast. I look forward to catching you in the next one. In the meantime, enjoy life on the leading edge.